Hi everyone, very excited to be here today at this Insights Tech Showcase and to be talking to you about unlocking insights, quantifications in conversational interfaces. Now, before telling you what we mean by this slightly convoluted title, let me very briefly introduce myself. My name is Maurice. I'm a techie by background, but I have been occupying myself by co-founding and building up Caplena, which is a startup helping customers, helping companies analyze and understand their customer feedback in more detail. And that's also the topic we're going to talk about today. It's customer feedback and how to get richer and deeper insights from it. Now, customer feedback can occur in a variety of forms. You can have quantitative questions, satisfaction scores, multiple choices, but hopefully you will also have some kind of open-ended text that really give you rich and deep insights like these examples here. So we have Santiago, who mentions that they lost their $23,000 suitcase. Or we have Zachary, who says he entered the plane normally, but left with a sore bum. And finally, we have Albert, who says, flight was too late, seats too close together, snacks were nasty, but I got what I paid for, would use again. Now, these treasures of customer insight are, of course, a highlight and will hopefully help us understand our customers a bit more in detail. And this is also the theme that we're going to follow today. We're going to always use examples from the airline industry because it's quite it's an example that everyone can relate to. And we will also enrich it every now and then by some examples on how Lufthansa does it. Lufthansa, one of the flagship customers of Caplena, and they really make a lot out of their customer feedback. So I think there is quite a bit to learn from them. But first of all, when we get customer feedback, it more often than not looks like this: a wall of text which screams at us and sort of repulses everyone from wanting to get started with the analysis. So obviously we need some smart way to make sense of this. And the first thing that comes to everyone's mind, I'm sure, is why don't we use ChatGPT? So, of course, we asked ourselves this question as well. Our investors asked us the same question, and so we gave it a try. Let's have a look on how ChatGPT performs on a toy problem here. And the toy problem we give it is that we provide a couple of examples on product feedback. Product is great, product is awesome, product is fantastic. And we then ask it to tell us what percentage of people said it's bad. Now, as usual, ChatGPT won't take long to give us a response and will tell us that 4 out of 8 or 50% of the people mentioned that the product is bad. But if we look at this a bit more in detail, we can see that, well, 3 people mentioned verbatimly the product is bad. So 3 out of 8 is obviously not 50%. But we'd be interested more in the number of people that mentioned something along the line of it being bad. So their terrible and not good would also count towards this, but that would then make it 5 out of 8, which is also not correct. So however we look at it, ChatGPT is not offering the correct result, even for this very simple example. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to badmouth ChatGPT in any way. It's an absolutely fantastic product, and we're going to make a lot deeper use of it a couple of minutes down the road and show you how to apply it in a very value-adding way. But simply throwing data into it and asking it to quantify it is not the right way and will more often than not lead you astray. So how do we go about analyzing feedback then? Well, we have developed a very elaborate life cycle or process to identify and quantify the topics mentioned in open-ended and customer feedback in general in detail and really in a reliable way. And this is a 4-step process. First of all, you start with identifying that topics that you actually want to quantify and track. Second of all, you do some quality assurance, making sure that the AI does the correct thing. The third step is dashboarding and reporting. And finally, you want to take action from the results. Now, we're only going to cover the steps 1 and 2 very, very briefly in one slide each, and then going to spend the majority of the time we have in the session today on the third one, the dashboarding and reporting, and specifically our conversational insights interface, which we're also going to demo live afterwards. So what do we mean by topic identification? Well, you need to define which topics do you want to track, because you want to be able to quantify them not only at one place, one point in time, but also over time to see how things develop. And of course, we make strong use of LLMs and generative AI here, but nevertheless, we think that some level of human supervision is still the best way to get high quality results. That's why our system will present you with potentially relevant topics for you, but then ask very specific questions on how these topics should be grouped or should be aggregated in detail. So for example, here it would ask you, are prices, fees, and value for money really two separate topics, or are they the same concept for you? And by going through this iterative process, you will get to a very high quality topic collection, hopefully covering the entirety of your feedback. This might be 20 or 30 topics if you're doing a one-off study with 500 or 1,000 respondents, or it might be 300 different topics in the case of Lufthansa, for example, where you have a huge variety of things that pop up. Themes from the online check-in, from the baggage drop, the lounges, the in-flight experience, and post-flight experience. Now, once we have identified and created these topics, which will take maybe, which is a matter of minutes if you are doing this ad hoc study type, it's maybe a matter of a couple of hours if you do these very elaborate trackers over time and dealing with millions of responses. Now, the second step, as I already mentioned, is fine-tuning and quality assurance. So, of course, we have an AI, as many other vendors do as well, that will assign these topics automatically to your responses, be it 100 or 100,000. But again, some level of human supervision probably makes sense to be sure that this topic assignment is done in exactly the way you want it to be. And by doing this quality assurance, you will nudge the AI into the right direction. And we will also provide you a score indicating how well the AI understood the task, how well your topic collection is set up, how well it can learn from you. Now, again, this will be a matter of minutes if you're dealing with a very simple data set, and maximum a couple of hours if you're dealing with these huge complex trackers. But now to the actually juicy part that we want to talk about today. So we have created this high quality topic assignment, this high quality quantification now, and we want to start digging into the results. So what we can do, of course, is create beautiful charts and dashboards. We can segment by other kinds of variables that we have in our data. For example, close questions, numerical questions, scores. We can use demographic data if we have it in our data, etc., etc. But what we actually want to talk about today is a completely new way to interact with these results. And that's the conversational interface. So here I would like to stop showing you slides and jump into the juicy details of how this looks in practice. So let's hop over to the app. So here we are now in our Conversational Insights interface. And the first question we're asked is whether we want to use GPT-4o or Gemini 1.5 Pro. So we deliberately implemented both LLMs for our customers to be able to experiment and see the differences on how they perform. My personal take is that GPT-4o will often be a bit more elaborate, will provide a bit nicer answers, whereas Gemini might be a bit faster, although I do think GPT-4o is catching up in that dimension as well. So we'll hit GPT-4o here. And then the second question we're asked is to choose a text column and a rating column. Now, as soon as we have done that, the system will start creating an overview of this project to give us some context. So this is these are Skytrax reviews from Caplena Air, which is a bit of wordplay on our brand. But basically, Skytrax reviews, 9,400 rows, and we have a number of different columns associated with this data. For example, airline names, territories, overall ratings, etc. Now, the quantification that I mentioned in the previous step has been performed on this already. So these results are based on the quantification that we have. And our vision for this conversational insights is really to combine qualitative and quantitative data in a meaningful way. So we will try to show you the most relevant parts of the quantification part and combine it with qualitative insights. So first of all, we will show you the most mentioned topics, for example. So the satisfaction with airline or company in general was mentioned very often. Punctuality was mentioned very often. The most positive, most often praised topic is food and beverages. The most criticized topic is just the general satisfaction and irregularities, punctuality. And what we have as option now is that we can let us be guided through these results by the conversational interface. So we just consume the insights, assuming that we have never seen the data before, and bit by bit, it will serve us interesting nuggets and pieces of insights. For example, here we look at the relative share of satisfaction. So the flight schedule, frequency of flights, was mentioned overwhelmingly positive, whereas additional booking fees were unsurprisingly mentioned exclusively negative. We can also go a bit further. What the AI will do now, or our system will do now, is that it computes a driver analyses. It will show us how big the impact of certain topics is on the overall satisfaction. And just grabbing one number here, so an example, it says that if people would not mention punctualities in a negative way anymore, this would increase our NPS score by 2.5 points, which is quite considerable for a single topic. Keep in mind that we have quite a big number of topics in our data. We can also ask that. How many topics do we have? 85 topics in total. So we could go on and just consume data as we go through. Maybe one more example here. The irregularities we are plotting now because we said, it's the one having the biggest impact on the NPS, and we're correlating this with other columns. So we can see how other columns influence this topic. And for example, we see that for the airline JetBlue, this was mentioned negatively above average. So in a higher number of cases, whereas for Singapore Airlines, the mentions for punctuality were rather low. But of course, the cool and revolutionary thing about conversational insights interfaces is that we can interact with it and pose specific questions in our own languages. So we could, for example, ask it, how many people mentioned sandwiches? And we would get a summary of what people said about sandwiches, the attributes they associated with them, and also a couple of examples. We can also be very specific. For example, ask, did anyone mention a reindeer sandwich? And of course, I know this data set already a bit, so I know there is actually one response mentioning a reindeer sandwich, and that is on a flight on Wildro. And the person said, bought a reindeer sandwich and a Coke, which was an adequate snack. Would actually be curious to try this as well. What we can also do is we can segment by other kind of variables, as I said before. So we could, for example, ask, what do people from Europe say? And the system will then automatically understand that it should now segment the data and filter for the results from Europe. And I think this is a very nice example of the combination of quantification and qualitative results that I mentioned before. So a number of different things happen here. First of all, we give you a high-level overview of what people say, and we point out specific differences of this segment to the average. So, for example, here the ground staff, airport staff was mentioned more negatively in this segment than on average. And the interesting thing here is that this is not just a difference in numbers, but we actually do some significance testing here in the background and show you that this is not a random correlation. This is really a a statistically significant difference. The same thing for punctuality. Punctuality was mentioned more positively in Europe compared to 28% overall. And to put this in numbers as well, we will always show the relevant charts here on the right-hand side that actually give you the same information, or even more information, of course, than in the text, to enrich this and give you a complete picture of the question you asked. And finally, we will give you a couple of sample comments on this segment as well. So from my perspective, this does look a bit like magic, and 2 years ago I wouldn't have thought this to be possible at this moment in time. But I think it's also important to show where the limits of these systems are, what they're capable of doing and what not. And for that, I think it's important to understand how it works. So what happens in this system is that we use these LLMs as an interpreter between the user and our system, our backend system. And what will happen is that the LLM will translate these open-ended and free text questions into structured queries with which it will query our backend system. So all the numbers that you see in here, all the analyses that are performed, they are computed on our backend system and not by the LLM. And this is very important because, as I showed in the introductory example today, LLMs are really bad at doing these kind of quantifications themselves. So we actually spent a lot of time on making sure that they don't try to do that. Don't try to compute anything yourself, LLM, but ask our backend system. Now, the good thing about this approach is that it will provide very reliable results, and the computations are actually correct. The downside is that, of course, every quantification, every analysis type has to be implemented in our backend as well. So it's not like it can do just magically any kind of analyses, but only the kind of things that are also implemented in our backend system. Now, what does this mean? What kind of new analysis does this conversational insight now allow? And the skeptics among you might say, well, basically it's just a new kind of way to display the data. It's not any kind of entirely new analyses. All these kind of charts and results could have been produced by a more traditional dashboard, for example, as well. And you're not wrong there. That's actually the results, all the quantification results could have been produced by a more traditional dashboard as well. But there is one big difference. And for that, let me jump back into the slides for one moment. Because the big difference that we have is the train of thought. With these conversational interfaces, you can ask your own questions in your own words and get responses within a couple of seconds or minutes at most. Whereas even with a super intuitive dashboarding and reporting solution, you will often find yourself having to spend 5, 10, 30 minutes, or maybe even an hour to create these charts and dashboards that will allow you to answer a specific question. And the difference between having an answer within 30 seconds or an answer within 10 or 15 minutes is the number of follow-up questions that you are going to pose. If you have an answer within 30 seconds, you will go down this route of finding insights based on your train of thought, probably much deeper than if you have to spend 10 or 15 minutes on laborious work for every answer. You will stop much earlier. And I think this is the big change here. This is where conversational insights interfaces can really make a big difference in the depth of insights that we uncover from our data. And with that, I'm at the end of my presentation. I do hope you could gain some understanding and some inspiration on what is possible today. And if you're interested in looking at your data in a more intuitive and in-depth form as well, we'd be very happy to have a chat with you and to support you on your quest for insights. So thank you very much for this, and I wish everyone a happy weekend. Bye-bye.